This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
Are you listening to the show while you're driving? You're not alone. Holiday weekends are hectic enough, but add to that pulling boats, off-road travel headed to the dove field, and you're thankful you spent those extra bucks on four-wheel drive. Still, accidents happen, so we go inside outdoors with the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety and law enforcement in the field for timely advice as fall hunting, fishing, and fabulous fall colors call us to hit the road and hit the hills. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio. Navy Air Rescue swimmer Luigi Caprio.
If it's 2 a.m., a tsunami, or freezing cold, two tools make a difference: a calm voice and a life jacket. On a lake or a pleasure boat, there may come a time you're called upon to do my job. Accidents happen. I am a rescue swimmer, and I am here to help you. Life jackets. They live up to their name every day and night.
Kentucky Fish and Wildlife reminds you, your life jackets got your back, and the backing of the best swimmers everywhere. Hip's a hip word. Hip-hop music. This cat is really hip, says 70s star Sammy Davis Jr. But for migratory bird hunters, HIP is the law. HIP stands for Harvest Information Program. To hunt birds like doves or geese, you must complete the HIP survey first to help officials better estimate game bird populations. Go to the My Profile page at the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website. You just need 5 minutes. Hip hip hooray. fw.ky.gov. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and if you listen to this show, you are aware that at the very end of the show, I always, with rare exception, ask my guest, do you text and drive? It's that time of year with Labor Day weekend upon us, and with hunting seasons opening seemingly by the dozens in September, dove season, turkey, deer, and more. More and more people are hitting the road for nature and wildlife pursuits, fall colors among them. The numbers add up. The latest census has Kentucky's population at 4,300,000 people, 4.3 million. Of those, roughly 1 million, that's 1 in 4 right there, hold a hunting or fishing license. That number potentially doubles when you add in backpackers, kayakers, canoers, hikers, photographers, and others out and about just to watch fall bird migrations or to see Kentucky's famous fall colors. So the act of driving itself can sometimes take a back seat to everything else going on. So, in the interest of safety on this show, we are talking to experts with timely reminders on how to get from point A to point B and back home again in good shape. First up, we talk with former Kentucky State Trooper, now Fish and Wildlife Conservation Officer, Brad Bowles. You are in Butler County.
Yes, sir, I am.
Got any back roads down that way? 2 or 300?
Just a few.
I've been to Butler County and Morgantown a time or two. And,
yes,
of course, we were on there, and proud to be there.
Awesome. Good deal. Good deal.
Well, we got a lot of people that like to hunt, fish, boat, or just get out and drive and enjoy the Kentucky scenery. It's amazing how much nature and wildlife interact with our driving. For example, if I see a rabbit darting across the road, should I swerve or should I hit it?
That's a great question, and I think people kind of just instinctually are conditioned to try to avoid, hitting animals in the roadway. But depending on their speed, depending on their location, there's too many factors to consider when it comes to thinking, do I need to avoid this or do I need to hit the animal? And for the sake of safety, most of the time, it's going to be best for you to go ahead and hit that animal. It's a lot easier to repair the damage on a vehicle than it is to repair your damaged self if you were to run off the road and, wreck in a ditch or hit a tree or something.
What if it were a cardinal? What if it were a bird of prey?
Again, it's just your own safety has to trump that. As you're driving down the road, a vehicle collision at any speed can really be, harmful and in a lot of cases fatal. So, we want to try to protect the wildlife any way that we can. And if there's a situation where through decreased speed, if you can decrease your speed enough to allow you to to apply some kind of avoidance maneuver around safely, then by all means, that's the best thing to do. But, the very unpredictable nature of most wildlife prevents us from being able to do that. So most of the time it's, oh my gosh, it's there, and it's right in front of you. So in those instances, as unfortunate as it might be to harm an animal like that, it's really the safer choice.
Sometimes that unpredictability will come with a warning sign. I'm talking about that yellow sign with a deer on it and says deer crossing.
Those signs are put there for a reason. And so many times with any kind of accident that we encounter out there on the roadway, people aren't practicing active driving. They're distracted. Even, if they're not texting, just talking on the cell phone can distract you. And a lot of times they don't pay attention to these signs at all. They're put there for a reason, and really people need to slow down when they see those yellow animal crossing signs, because they're put there for a reason, because the frequency of deer in the area.
And is that year-round or just during the rut season, during the hunting season in fall?
It would be year-round because of just the number of deer that are in that area and the number of accidents that occur. But obviously, the rut time of year is going to increase that deer activity. So people need to be mindful of that as we go into the fall seasons, beginning middle of October all the way through November. You're going to see the increased movement of deer activity, especially crossing the roads, and the periods of dawn and dusk and through the night are when they're most active. So
I had a deer biologist on the show several years ago, and he said deer are the most active when people see the worst, right there at dawn and dusk, twilight times.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Do deer whistles on the hoods of cars make a difference in your experience?
Really not so much. And, anything, I wouldn't discourage the use, but what we don't want to see people do is be lulled into some kind of false sense of security that because they have these deer whistles on their car, that, hey, I can just drive through an area and not slow down. Most of the time where you see one, there's a great chance there's another one nearby.
You can find species of wildlife willing to test fate any time of the day, any place along the road, to dash out in front of you. I was driving home late the other night. My wife was on the phone saying, watch out, you will see deer at such and such an intersection. And sure enough, they were there.
Most of the time where you see one, there's a great chance there's another one nearby, especially we see this a lot. The 2 times a year in the spring, when the mother has the young offspring, they're going to have a young deer in tow. And then again in the fall in the rut season, if a doe runs across the road, more than likely she might have a buck in tow.
If we can move on from deer, you're trailering a boat, or maybe just you're pulling a trailer, and on it there's all manner of kayaks or canoes, or you're pulling something, a four-wheeler, a camper. Any tips for folks who maybe don't do this much?
Sure. One thing that you need to know is what your limits are as an operator when you're towing these things. And you need to practice your backing. A lot of times trailering a boat backing down a ramp, this is where we see the most complaints from people. People just don't really know what they're doing. So don't just go out there on the road, hook it up, and take off. Take a little time, go to a big empty parking lot, do a few things to familiarize yourself with how the vehicle pulls. Different weights, the different loading of whatever you're hauling may affect the way that trailer pulls behind. You need to be aware of that and know what to do in case, if you're going down the road, how to handle that different load shift and load transfer. And practice makes perfect.
And just because your car has a trailer hitch doesn't mean it's capable of pulling a bass boat.
Exactly. Every bumper should have a load capacity. It should have an indicator there that will tell you the tongue weight that it can support. The towing capacity, you need to be familiar with that to know that you're not putting yourself in an unsafe position by hauling a load that's too heavy, be it a boat or a trailer with a four-wheeler and a load of firewood or something.
There are plenty of folks out there that will overdo it is that something you would, I don't know, pull them over? It sounds sort of mean, but at least say, you may be overdoing it here with this small vehicle pulling this large a load.
You do see that, and often the person doesn't realize that they're creating quite a traffic hazard. Even if they are able to get that load to move down the roadway, it's probably not going to be in any kind of safe fashion. So not only are they putting themselves at risk, they're putting other motorists at risk.
Avoiding driving mishaps is the topic if you're hitting the road to enjoy the great outdoors, crossing creeks, launching boats, drowsy driving, and more still to come. My name is Charlie Baglin, and you're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We're back on Kentucky Afield Radio. I'm Charlie Baglin. Officer Brad Bowles from Butler County is with me on the phone. And fall fishing and boating, what's key to remember at the boat ramp?
A lot of times, the biggest thing is there's a line at the ramp, and so people are kind of hurried, and they do things quick, and they don't really take their time to slow down and examine what's going on. And before they realize it, the vehicle's in the water, or somebody's fallen off the trailer, or they're jackknifed right in the middle of the ramp. So again, it all goes back to knowing what you're comfortable and what you're capable of doing, how many times you practice. And every ramp in Kentucky is a different, it's a different grade. You have some very, very steep along the river to where your lakes aren't as bad, and each one of those situations, it's going to be a harder pull on the vehicles and stress on the vehicles and stuff too. So you've got to be able to know how to maneuver in each one of those situations.
Well, speaking about driving in water, what's your advice about floodwaters?
You cannot overemphasize the importance of, they say it all the time here on our weather station, turn around, don't drown. People have a false sense of security around water. They think a vehicle, weighs so much. It doesn't take much water to move a vehicle off of a low water ford. You can find yourself in a very dangerous situation very quickly. Lastly, equipment is very important. Check your tires. You've got to have good tread depth on those tires, because without that also lends to hydroplaning. The channels there that channel the waterway, if you don't have that tread there, it's just not going to do it effectively, and it's going to make your car, put yourself in a position where you're going to hydroplane.
One of the things, oftentimes to get the turkey or to get the deer or to get the fish, you got to be up and at them before the dawn. And with that comes drowsy driving. And what's your minute message?
If you find yourself in a position where you're not fully alert to where you can practice active driving, don't put yourself behind the wheel. Drowsy conditions can put you in just as much of an equal state as someone who is impaired. And obviously that's an unsafe situation for yourself and other people on the road.
Nobody in this state would ever do that, of course, and nor would anybody in this state ever go out and have an adult beverage or 2 or 6 or 12 on a boat. Impaired boating thus becomes impaired driving, and you put more people at risk.
You sure do. The effects of alcohol in the water alone are downplayed a lot. People go to the lake. It's a recreational time. A lot of times that recreation includes people partaking of alcoholic beverages, and they just don't realize that the fatigue factors of boating alone can put you in that drowsy state itself to give you impaired-like symptoms. So then you're adding the effects of alcohol on top of that. This is kind of a double whammy. So if you're able to transfer from the boat to the vehicle, you can just see the situation. You're tired. You've been on the water all day long. The sun drains you, and then the effects of the alcohol, slows your reaction time down, and that's where we see the accidents. How
about this as a line of thought? I have a big 4-wheel drive. I am invincible. True or false? We
see that a lot in the snows. This past winter we had some record snowfalls, and you oftentimes see this behavior. The trucks, they don't slow down, and it's all, again, some of this goes back to how capable you are as a driver. Some guys may be very well versed and have driven up north and know that type of inclement weather very well and are capable. Most are not, though, and it all comes back to common sense. inclement weather, any kind, slow down. Don't just automatically assume because you have four-wheel drive that you're not going to wind up in a ditch. Even our hunting accidents, a lot of times they're because of they're late to the deer stand and they're quickly trying to get their firearm out of the truck, or they're quickly trying to ascend into their deer stand. It's all that hurriedness and that fast pace of life. People just need to slow down and just realize, that there are these dangers out there, that they need to just take their time and make sure they get where they're going safely.
Four-wheel drives, I have one. It's in the form of a Jeep Cherokee. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, when do you use four-wheel drive?
Basically, just those instances where there's snow and ice on the road. Now, obviously, the big message here is if you don't have to be out there on the roads during that point in time, don't be. But if you find yourself that you have no other choice, that's a good time to have those. The only other time really is if you're a sportsman, you find yourself off-road, maybe in a field or something, maybe a big thunder shower or something has come in, it's gotten real muddy or something, and you need that extra four-wheel drive, the extra traction and stuff to navigate that rougher terrain.
You need to be in a muddy situation or a slippery or an icy, wet, boggy situation to be able to utilize four-wheel drive, as I understand it, versus being out on a dry highway but pulling a large load. Say you're pulling a big bass boat. That's not the time to use four-wheel drive, but being in the slippery, messy situation is.
Exactly right. Most vehicles are going to do fine under a dry surface, with the only exception maybe being a steep boat ramp, a wet boat ramp, or an icy boat ramp. That would be a good time to activate your four-wheel drive to help pull a heavy boat out of the water. Once you get off-road, that's when you would probably lean more. And it's not so much any kind of mud, sand, water, or maybe even a steep grade. Would be good off-road for the four-wheel drive.
What's going to take folks off-road? It could be driving over to a pond. Could be going to the deer woods, the turkey woods. Mm-hmm. Any number of reasons you're out there. You may be pulling motorcycles or horses. Any tips on four-wheeling it?
We encounter people who have gotten stuck or been in accidents. They just take off-road without really knowing where they're going. Maybe there's not a path, so they're going to create one. If there's a questionable area, if you don't know the terrain, it would be best to actually get out of your vehicle and actually walk to make sure that you're not, if it's a field full of weeds, that you're not driving off into a sinkhole, or there's not some dry creek bed or something of that nature, so that you're prepared when you do go into the field to know it.
Brad Bowles, Conservation Officer in Butler County, home of the Butler County Bears. Thank you, sir, for sharing your wisdom.
All right. Yes, sir. You have a good afternoon.
All right. Picked up some interesting traffic trivia, the book by Tom Vanderbilt, called Why We Drive Like We Do and What It Says About Us. It says people are more likely to jaywalk when a well-dressed person has already done it ahead of them first. Another tidbit, pedestrians think drivers can see them up to twice as far away as they actually can. One last piece, anywhere from 10% to 70% of the people driving in a city, an urban traffic situation, you know what they're doing? They're looking for a place to park. Traffic affects everyone, including my next two guests, Sergeant Michael Webb, Public Affairs Specialist with the Kentucky State Police, and Bill Bell, who is Executive Director of the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety. And gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
You two have your fingers on the pulse of driver safety, and nothing gripes me more than someone who's asleep at the wheel and not paying attention. It puts everybody at risk. Now, I give texters grief on this show, but I was reading in the newspaper recently that driver inattention, maybe even more so than texting and driving, is the culprit in more accidents, such as digging in your purse for something, fiddling with the radio, you have a child in the back seat, you're eating, you're shaving. Distracted driving can do you in. I give a lot of grief to texting on this show, but really, where does texting fit in?
I think it's the leader of the distractions, and it's the one that takes your eyes off the road, your hands off the wheel, and your mind off the task of driving.
I was Googling this. I wanted to know the top reasons people got into car wrecks, and the wealth of them came from injury lawyer firms. And I'm going to guess that they're pretty close to being right. But if it has to do with, for example, speeding while driving, reckless driving, that's going to be the push of their commercial. So they may skew it a little bit to fit their needs, but nonetheless, that distraction of driving pretty much says it all.
Really, texting while driving is just kind of the flagship of the distracted driving conversation. And thankfully, our legislature passed a law, I believe it was 2011. It's been a few years ago, but basically it went into effect for the texting and driving ban. That being the flagship of the distracted conversation, we don't want to overlook all the other things that go along with distractions as well. You know, when I was a trooper working the roadways in the Commonwealth, I unfortunately had the experience to stop people reading the newspaper. Folks that were eating with both hands, driving with their knees, going down the road, ladies going to work, putting on their makeup. There's a variety of different things that troopers and law enforcement officers, our local agency partners, see on the roadways in the Commonwealth that just absolutely put all the other motorists and themselves in danger.
We see it every day. We have a break coming up, gentlemen, a fishing report too, then back with our show that affects everybody. Highway safety, especially as we hit the road for outdoor fun this fall. I'm Charlie Bagwell, and you're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Bagwell back on Kentucky Afield Radio. If you would like to share this program on Facebook or email somebody the link or just to listen to it again, we encourage you to do so, and there are 3 places you can find it. The first, we are a podcast on iTunes. You can also go to myhuntingandfishing.com. And you'll find us, too, on our Kentucky Afield channel on YouTube. Let's go to the search box, put in Kentucky Afield Radio, and there we are. It is time now for our fishing report.
This is Tom with your fishing report from the Northeast. Cave Run Lake is right at summer pool levels, and temperatures are in the mid to low 80s. Bass anglers are starting to pick up a few small fish and a few overfish with some regularity along the shorelines with spinnerbaits and jerkbaits. Crappie on Cave Run Lake are still going strong. The bite has slowed back from this summer's frenzy, but if you have several different brush piles on the main lake, you should be able to pick up a mess in an afternoon of fishing. Grayson Lake is also picking up with the largemouth bass, fish slow and around deeper ledges. Keep an eye out for bait fish and follow those around for your best luck. Hybrids are also keying in strong on the bait fish. They're being caught up shallow in the morning and down deeper as the day wears on. Bass are growing strong on Lake Wilgreen and Madison County on creature baits. Greenbow channel cats are hot on cut baits, and Reba is producing some nice messes of sunfish. That should do it for us up here in the Northeast. Good luck and hope to see you on the water.
Hi, this is John Williams with Fishery Report for Southeast Kentucky. At Lake Cumberland, the striped bass fishing has remained good. Most of the fish are toward the lower end of the lake near the dam, and 50 to 70 feet of water being caught by drifting live shad or alewives, or by trolling downriggers with dogflies and curly tails. Also, the tailwater at Lake Cumberland has calmed down a little bit with the lack of rain, so we're getting more regular releases. Good weight fishing down there for trout, using small spinners or small cranks, or the fly fishermen can wade and select good areas, especially around Helms is a good area. Elsewhere in the district, a lot of our rivers are getting kind of low with the lack of rain, but if we do get some rain, look for doing some float trips in Upper Cumberland, Buck Creek, Rock Castle. All those provide good smallmouth, rock bass, other sunfish. Rebel crawl spinners are the ticket there. As always, good luck, good fishing.
This is Rob Rold in the Northwestern Fishery District. Our 2 main reservoirs, Rough River Lake and Nolan River Lake, both had summer pool and holding steady. Catfish are biting good on both reservoirs, especially fishing flats next to the channel drop-offs. Use cut bait, commercially prepared bait, liver bait for channels. If you prefer catching the larger flatheads, live bluegill's a good bet. Crappie have been kind of hit and miss at both reservoirs. No Lin, the better bass, they're generally being caught at night on jigs or some larger plastic baits. When they're fished in the 10 to 12 foot depth range, some of the most productive colors on the plastic baits seem to be black, purple, and blue. Another technique has been slow rolling spinner baits. That's an update from the Northwestern Fishery District. Please remember, be safe on the water. Always wear your PFDs.
If you are cited for texting and driving, does it cost you points against your license? Well, it does, and just how many we'll talk about after the break. Hip's a hip word. Hip-hop music. This cat is really hip, says 70s star Sammy Davis Jr. But for migratory bird hunters, HIP is the law. HIP stands for Harvest Information Program. To hunt birds like doves or geese, you must complete the HIP survey first to help officials better estimate game bird populations. Go to the My Profile page at the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website. You just need 5 minutes. Hip hip hooray. fw.ky.gov. This is Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. The Kentucky Office of Highway Safety. Big player in helping you keep safety in mind when you're driving. And the Kentucky State Police are often the first responders when you don't. With the influx of fall hunting seasons, fall recreation, fall colors, as many as 1 in 4 people on the road could be in search of wildlife-related recreation. Bill Bell with the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety is in the studio, along with Sergeant Mike Webb of the Kentucky State Police. Getting there is half the fun, if you keep your eyes on the road.
You're in a vehicle to get from point A to B. But today, vehicles are made with so much more luxurious options, and it's really a driving experience. It's not just getting your transportation from A to B. So now you've got so much technology and luxurious functions and options in the car. So many more. It's a buffet of distraction options, really, when you get in. Not to mention the eating and reading and putting on makeup and things like that. So, yeah, we try at every turn we can at the Kentucky State Police and our partners at the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety to educate the public. And there are even some studies that say that distracted driving is actually worse than impaired driving in certain situations.
I've heard that said a number of times, that if you're not paying attention, that's what it boils down to. You're taking your eye off the ball. If you're paying attention, chances are you're going to be okay. I've often wondered, of all the reasons there are listed on these sheets that I Googled, one that isn't there. It's somebody else's fault. It's never my fault. It's okay to Google. It's okay to adjust the radio or the air conditioning. It's always somebody else's fault. I don't know if that ever comes up in a trooper's report, though. But isn't it true that people think, well, it's not going to happen to me. It's okay if I do it.
Well, I don't want to speak for KSP, but there's always a vehicle number one.
The way a trooper responds to a collision is we come to document the scene as we discover it. We document the roadway evidence and the vehicles as we discover it. And we make that report. And typically we can tell which vehicle was the primary contributor to the collision. And we will identify that in the report. But it's unfortunately all too common that we see someone that has climbed in a car and has made the choice to text and drive or do some kind of other distracting thing. And, it's not even really just the distracted driving through visual. There's cognitive issues as well. Being on the telephone and talking on a telephone, it's not quite to the extent of texting while driving, but people do dismiss the amount of cognitive power that's tied up in talking on a phone, and their inattention, even while looking right out the window or out their windshield while driving, is still somewhat diminished. And
almost like you're in a trance.
It's exactly right, Bill. It's like you're in a trance. It's a very good way of putting it.
And it definitely narrows your peripheral while you're driving too. It's almost like you have tunnel vision.
It is.
If your hands are to the ear, it's a little bit different on the hands-free because you have a little more peripheral, but it's still distracting even on hands-free.
And an important case here in Bowling Green, I believe it's been 3 or 4 years now, our troopers had to respond to a very horrible and tragic traffic situation, a traffic collision in which a tractor-trailer collided with a van with a Mennonite family, and I believe it was 11 people died.
Yeah, I remember.
And it was because of a distracted driving situation and cell phone usage, and it really was the catalyst in federal legislation change in the commercial vehicle industry to go to hands-free. That was a horrible situation, which 11 innocent people just minding their own business going down the road lost their lives in an instant of tragedy from distracted driving.
Here at Kentucky Afield Radio, we have a large part of our audience, folks who like to get out, take advantage of hunting and fishing, and a lot of times it's going to pay you, if you want to have a successful harvest, to be in place early, like before sunrise. That could lead to drowsy driving?
Yes, sir. I've done several interviews on drowsy driving nationally with some trucking organizations. And, I'm a hunter. I've been a hunter all my life, and I've gotten up at dark 30 to go out and chase whitetails and ducks and whatever there is, in the season at that particular point. And it definitely is an issue, and it definitely takes your ability to react to a much more diminished state.
So let me ask you, either one of you, what are the laws concerning talking on the phone, texting on a phone? How do they apply today in Kentucky?
Well, texting is illegal. You can be cited. It's a primary offense. If you're cited for texting while driving and convicted, you will receive 3 points on your license. And if you receive 7 points if you're under the age of 18, or if you receive 12 points, period, if you're over 18, then you can have your license suspended. If there's any question, as far as other distractions, officers can write for careless driving. Certain situations, reckless driving. If you're going back to the drowsy driving, to me that could be careless. You've got to stop at a rest area. There's a rest area. If you have to sleep for 20 minutes, experts say you sleep for 20, 30 minutes, that could refresh you for hours.
Back to the texting. Your office, Kentucky Office of Highway Safety, ran a series of commercials, and I remember one of them very well. It's called Head Bobbers. They had this guy talking to, be aware of head bobbers. They're sort of like their heads bobbing up and down.
Like bobbleheads, yeah.
Bobbleheads, because they're looking at their phone. They're driving along, the head goes down, they look at their phone, then they're back up looking at the road again. Is that considered texting if you're just reading a text?
Oh, absolutely.
So it is. And
we look at, the question has come up, if you're looking at a Facebook post or some other social media, we talked to our attorneys and said, hey, what would your interpretation be of this? Because there is a question's been raised. So, if you look at the law, it says text-based communication. Mm-hmm. So in that, you're communicating on Facebook or Twitter with whoever. And so if you're reading that, you're receiving a communication from someone. To me, that's valid as far as text-based communication.
Have the new advances in technology helped? Voicemail, voice to text, read me back my text, is that?
Well, I think that they are definitely on the right track. However, there's still a long way to go to bridge that gap, because if you use the smartphone technology to the dictation where you use the microphone for it to spell out what you say, you still have to look over to make sure it's right. You end up doing what you were trying to avoid anyway. So is it a good idea? Yes, it is. Is it better than texting the whole thing out? I guess. But it's still, in the end, is taking away a person's focus right off the roadway. And, back to his point just a second ago, it's KRS 189.290 that is careless driving and can also be utilized for reckless driving. And basically, that law has been around since 1942, so those guys were well ahead of their time. But it says that the operator of any vehicle upon a highway shall operate the vehicle in a careful manner, with regard for the safety and convenience of pedestrians and other vehicles upon the highway. We have used that before. I have used that before in situations where you catch somebody doing something dangerous. Going down the road reading a newspaper may not fall under the texting and driving law. However, that certainly falls within careless and reckless driving, and obviously it's not hard to argue that their attention is not primarily focused on driving on the roadway.
All right, let me pose an argument.
Okay.
we are driving down the road, we are required to glance down at the speedometer. We are required to look at our rearview mirror, to have a general knowledge of the traffic in the lanes around us, behind us, and in front of us. We twist around to check our blind spot. I trust that that's okay. We glance to change gears, perhaps. Look at the gauges. We have to look at road signs. Check the speed limit. Is this my exit? We have to pay attention to all of these things. Then why is it, if I'm just driving down a highway and it's sunny, the road's straight, I can't take the same amount of time to glance down to read text or to send one?
Yeah, because it's not the same amount of time. I mean, you're taking a fraction of a second looking at the speed limit, looking at the mirrors, and that's what you're supposed to be doing while driving. That's part of the task of driving. If you're reading a text, the average person that takes their time to read a text is 4.5 seconds. That's a long time compared to glancing at a speed limit or the mirror. It's taking away from the task of driving.
Is there such a term as an expected level of distraction or an expected level of attention?
When you look at the speed limit sign, or you look at your indicator on your speedometer, or you look at the clock in your car, those are instantaneous understandings where there's not a cognitive process. It's just boom, it's there. So it's really not even a valid argument at all. And when you're driving down the road, there is becoming an oversaturation of information on our roadways with all the commercialization of advertisements, and at any given point in any given town, there's really thousands of things to look at between stoplights and signs, the things you're supposed to look at, but then all the other signs on the roadway and all the other advertisements. It is very tempting to look away. I mean, if you were to imagine to go down to Pigeon Forge and drive through there and look at all the distractions you would have, I don't even know if you could count them all. So there you have that angle, but in the vehicle, there's no comparison between the things that we want you to do, to look at the mirror, check your blind spot, look at your speedometer, have your hands at 10 and 2, and be driving safely.
Okay, what if I'm at a stop sign? It's a stop light, and it's one of those that's going to take a couple minutes. Mm-hmm. Is there any leeway there to...
Yeah, the law actually says while the vehicle's in motion. Now, some states say while the vehicle's in operation. That means at a stoplight you cannot text. So right now it's just a nuisance because you've got people that are not going on green because they're finishing up a text or what have you. So right now it says while the vehicle's in motion.
That's exactly right.
We need to take a break. Back with our final few on transportation safety from the field to the lake to home and everywhere in between. This is Charlie Bagland. Stay with us on Kentucky Afield Radio. We are back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Mr. Bell, over the years you've had a lot of safe driving campaigns. Let me say some of these. I'm sure you'll remember them. I remember one airing in Louisville. It said, "Be alert, be a leader. Be aware of the people behind you. If you're poking along, you're slowing down a mile of traffic behind you. One text could wreck it all. Drive sober, get pulled over." I don't know if these are all yours or out of the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety, but we all see them, and we all lump highway safety into one basket if it's actually the transportation cabinet or state police or who it might be. Over the limit, under arrest. What's the real message you send when you text and drive? Share the road with motorcycles. Distracted driving is deadly driving. What is the current?
The current texting and driving campaign is you drive, you text, you pay. And that has been going on now for 2 years. And we receive federal funding for that campaign, and it's done every April. Now, we're expanding this year. We're probably going to roll this out again in October. So we do have some extra funds left over from April, so we're going to continue that again in October.
Click it or ticket, your polo shirt says. Is that a product, that campaign, of your office?
I think that's a household brand, really. I mean, I think everybody knows that campaign motto, Click It or Ticket. It was started back in 1991 in the state of North Carolina, and we've been doing it here for several years. So that's every May. And it centers around Memorial Day weekend, so in the weeks leading up to that.
There's really 4 big driving behaviors that the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety and the Kentucky State Police and its local law enforcement partners focus on. And that's speeding, impaired driving, seatbelt usage, and texting while driving. Those are the 4 that we really target the most. If we know that those 4 areas of concern are the largest contributors to fatalities, then we know that we need to direct our efforts and make goals to reduce those behaviors and focus on those. So, we develop campaigns with the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety through federal funding to provide overtime, to provide greater and enhanced enforcement to attempt to reduce those behaviors. We believe if we can reduce those behaviors, we can reduce the number of fatalities. Our goal is to drive as close to 0 fatalities as possible, and we're doing everything in our power. I promise you that the Kentucky State Police, it is definitely of major concern to them daily about the fatality rate. We get a report every day that shows how many fatalities there have been in the Commonwealth. It is one of our main goals to reduce highway fatalities and increase highway safety.
Worst time of the day for accidents?
It's going to be nighttime, 7 to 3 a.m.
7 to 3. What's the worst day of the week for driving and try to stay out of an accident?
I would say the weekend, Friday, Saturdays.
A football friend of mine and I were pulling out on the highway once upon a time, and the instant started to pull onto the entrance ramp onto the highway, he pulls out his iPhone and starts sending a text. And I said, listen, if you're going to text and drive, just let me off right here. I'll walk to the game. Oh, what? And he tries to come up with an excuse for it. Is there any excuse?
There's no excuse, and actually we promote designated driving all the time for impaired driving. We actually have been trying to promote designated texting for the distracted issue. And look, if you've got more than one person in your car and you're driving, there's not a thing wrong in the world with giving the phone to the person sitting in the passenger seat next to you and saying, can you be my designated texter? It doesn't have to be that formal, but you get the idea. Can you send a text for me? And listen, that's as effective as any technology is ever going to be out there, is giving your phone to another human being saying, hey, can you send a text for me?
But the point is, people try to say, well, this was important. This was from my babysitter. Or this was the guy I'm meeting in the tree stand. This was an important text.
Well, if it's that important, then pull off at the next rest area or the next exit. And, I've done that before. If my phone is blowing up, I'll pull over at the next exit and pull off to the side of the road or at the gas station or what have you. And
if it's that important, just call. You can just hit the call button and call them.
Yeah. So you can call.
Well, you can call.
That's legal.
Well, you can talk on your cell phone if you're over 18 in the Commonwealth of Kentucky and you have a full driver's license. You can talk on the phone. I'm just saying, if it's an emergency, like some people try to use as their excuse, well, I really needed to send this text. It was my babysitter.
Yeah.
Well, your first option would be to pull over, as Bill said. If you can't find somewhere to pull over, then just hit the call button and call them back. But you don't need to send a text. There's really just no valid excuse why you would ever send a text message while operating a vehicle moving on the roadway. There's just not. It doesn't make any sense.
When I was in high school in the later 70s, they had a little class called driver's education.
It's not mandated in high schools. I think the funding has long been gone, but there are classes out there in the GDL program. They have to take at least an online class. So, and there are instructors out there that will take you out and do a hands-on course.
This was an entire semester, and I remember backing around those orange cones in the parking lot. And I remember the 10 and 2, the 9 and 3. I remember these things. Mm-hmm. And I learned. And I think that I came away a better driver, other than not that mom and dad aren't good drivers.
Yeah,
but a lot of times kids learn bad habits from them.
Well, whatever their parents are doing, they're teaching them how to drive, whether they realize it or not. Fact is, they don't need to go and learn how to drive when they turn 16 because they've been taught for all their life, the previous 15 years. Right. They've been watching other people do it, specifically their parents or their guardians or whoever they're with. So those habits, good or bad, have been instilled in them by the time that they're 16.
I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but at this time of the show, I always ask my guests, this has been going on for years, do you text and drive? So I'll ask the two of you.
Well, I can answer that emphatically.
Do you text and drive?
I am a staunch opponent to texting and driving and will not put up with it.
Take that as a no, Mr. Bill.
No, I will hand my phone to my wife, and she can do that. Now, I'm not going to comment on her, but, you know.
It's just not worth it.
Gentlemen, I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
An excellent show. Listen, if you're on the road this fall in the name of the great outdoors, please be wise behind the wheel. We are out of time. This is Charlie Baglin inviting you to join us in a week, and we will go inside outdoors again, right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.